What does a great founder investor relationship look like? I think in one word, I just describe it as open.
Interesting.
Yeah. In my experience.
By the way, which of your hats is on at the moment?
Founder hat.
Okay.
So you wear investor hat. So I'm wearing the founder hat.
Okay, fine.
I think a great founder investor relationship is one that we approach with openness.
Okay.
Right. From a founder perspective, every single investor I have a great relationship is one where I can go and talk to them about literally anything. And I feel like it will be a productive use of my time. And it's not one where, even though they're an investor, I feel judged or, and it might be an unreasonable ask sometimes, honestly, because sometimes as a founder, you are tripping, but it's just always characterized with that, openness from both sides.
Yeah.
And one where you feel like they're approachable and that they'll be honest with you. I've had that for 10 years, and I'll tell you, it's probably still the best one.
Yeah.
And as we grow and get more investors, I actually do optimize for people I feel very comfortable with. And so you can layer on other heuristics like please have money and things like that. But I think that being comfortable with the person who you're letting into your company is an important key
It's
part.
a long journey and it's a long relationship, and you kind of have to, it has to work for a long time.
Exactly.
So I kind of hear you on openness. Maybe it's a similar concept, but I guess to what extent do you think trust is a different dimension to openness?
Well, I don't think an investor is writing a check into a founder they don't trust.
No, your founder hat is still on.
Oh, okay. As a founder, trust. Yeah, it goes into that openness thing. And for founders, it's really around, how closely do you guard this relationship that we have? Ecosystem is very small. If you talk about me, I'm here. So I always, again, optimize for people who you feel like you can be comfortable, open, and just tell them this thing so that they can help you arrive at it as a solution without you becoming gossip fodder. Right? Founders are very...
Without you becoming a teachable story.
Honestly, one of the founders I was talking to the other day, it's guys.
That was me. What about something like accountability? To what extent do you think that is important to what extent do you think of it? Do you, I suppose on some level, every good founder knows that they should be accountable to their investors in some way. But to what extent do you find that it's a top of mind thing? Kind of, if I say I'm going to do something, I need to do it. This is interesting.
Have you read Mr. Alumide's book?
Not yet.
Well, you should go read it. There's an email that he writes to us in that email where he was going in, it was an email he wrote to us in, I can't remember the year, where we just raised money and he did not like how we made the first set of expenses. And he wrote it in that email and I still have it. And, our relationship with him is even closer now just because we don't eschew that, but it's important that someone be able to tell you, what you're doing right now is wrong. And so maybe because that's the relationship I've always optimized for, where we're open, but don't allow me get away with things. Yes, men are useless to you on a founder journey. Anyone that cannot tell you, we can laugh together, we can grab drinks together, but when you've misbehaved when it comes to your work, also be honest with you about it. That's not a great founder relationship, a founder-investor relationship at all. And I think that as human beings, you are almost reflexively resistant to someone telling you are wrong. But as a founder, you need that. Being held accountable is perhaps one of the best things an investor can do for you. It just has to be someone who's holding you accountable while also trying to help you find ways to fix it if there's a challenge. So the thing is, people can lean a lot towards this side, not enough, but you really require someone who can find that balance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess, I agree. So from the investor side, I agree with all of that. I agree that mutual trust is important. I agree that mutual accountability is important.
It really is.
Yeah, and I think that accountability for me is on both sides, right?
Yeah.
Kind of, did you do what you said you would do? Yeah. Now, the answer to that is either yes or no. Sometimes it's no. And I think in the world in which the answer is no, then what did you do about it? Like, did you come back and say, I said I was going to do this thing, I didn't do it, here's why. And here's what I'm going to do about it. So here's the next step. I think, and that works both ways. There's also something around, I think for me, I also really think about a great founder investor relationship, to your point around helping, wanting investors to potentially help you figure out challenges, is a lot of that you create a little bit of room for trust to kind of be broken, or for a lack of confidence and all of that stuff, in a world in which I, as the investor, when things are not going well, you don't tell me first.
Yeah.
It's obvious that they're not going well.
Yes.
But rather than you saying, look, we're on a journey to build a company here, we're on a journey to create value, this isn't working, I don't know how to fix it, let's fix it together. You kind of do this thing where we're all pretending that
managing ourselves. I think it's interesting that you said that,
Yeah.
because the people who bear the brunt of that the most are the early stage investors.
Yeah.
If you don't get that right from jump, that being able to tell your investor, oh, this is not going right, you will never be able to fix that.
Yeah.
Right. And so from a founder perspective, I've seen what it's like when you don't carry an investor along. I've seen what it's like when you do carry them along.
But more than carrying an investor along, so I agree with you 100% in terms of transparency and information sharing and all of that stuff. But I guess the point I'm making is a slightly more nuanced one. It's less about carrying them along, and it's more about intellectual honesty.
Yeah. Okay.
And really ultimately, where should the optimism stop and the realism kind of step in, right? And I think it's that thing of, we're running a bunch of experiments, the data is coming back and it's really, it's obvious that this thing isn't working. Instead of, you don't need to wait for the board meeting in 3 months' time to say this thing isn't working. It's like, hey, Eloho, this thing isn't working, right? Yeah. We're still trying to get from A to Z, right? The path is not, the path that we thought it was going to be isn't really working. Yeah. I don't know, I have a bunch of ideas around paths B, C, D. Let's talk about it. Or, honestly, I have no idea. Have you seen this before? I think that to me is how you build exponential trust, right?
So I think, yes, you're right, 100%. But that's actually even less an interpersonal thing than it's an internal thing.
It's a personal
because it really requires a lot of humility, self-awareness,
maturity,
and that intellectual honesty to be able to say even though the buck stops with me, all of the answers are not with me. And as a founder, I can tell you it's really hard to come to terms
and your ability
agree,
to even execute on the let me tell you depends on all those things you talked about, right? If I don't trust you, if I don't think
we don't have an open relationship,
it's very difficult for me to kind of be in a place of vulnerability, I imagine, as a founder, and say, hi, this thing that I was gung-ho about, I still kind of think we should do it.
And even when you do it, you have to actually be humble enough to actually take the solutions that are being offered to you. Yeah. There's so many steps to building a great relationship, and there's many ideals out there that people can look up to. Mm-hmm. But generally speaking, it's a step-by-step journey, one that starts with the two people being open and comfortable and trusting each other enough to know that it's a both-sided journey. And also for founders, understanding that there are different kinds of investors, right? No matter how early they come in or all of that, I think that there's also recognizing that some investors are people who will give you cash, and that's that. Some investors are people who give you cash and support. Some people are more support than the cash component of it all. I'm not sure. Those are mentors.
So here's a question, interestingly. I remember, in our early interactions with founders and our pitches, we always, we try and keep the meeting fairly structured, and we always allocate a bunch of time at the back end where we say, do you have questions for us? And often you'll have some founders say, of course, if a founder says, I have absolutely no questions, that makes me a bit nervous. But, and probably the most common question we get is, how do you support founders in your portfolio? And I think it's a good question, but it always makes me smile because
they're more than the money.
More than the money. What else are you doing? I'm like, it's a 200K check. Yes. It's cool if it's the money. And the reason I say that is because, and here is the question. To what extent do you think that it is wise to kind of have a framework of this is money and I'm going to focus all my money and in
Energy,
this
yeah.
person?
I think that's a very good question. I don't even know if I have an answer as much as I've sat in on investor meetings where the investor is like, oh, what kind of investor are you looking for? And I also think it's an interesting question because it's like, I'm really here for money. If you give me any other thing, that's great, but money first.
I'm here for the investor.
Yeah, so I think usually how I like separate them is the investors that are like curious about what else you want outside the money are generally people who are more likely to be offering you support.
That's fair.
Some investors don't have a habit of asking you, they just write you the check and see you at the next update, and that's okay. And so it's an investor who's already willing or talking to you about what else you want outside of the capital is one that is interested in going beyond the money. And as a founder, you have to be able to read those cues as well. Right? So money is actually a big part of your journey. So you can't really be saying, oh, I don't want just money, because that's weird. But when you want money and support, you can usually tell investors that will offer you support. You can usually
As a
tell investors
founder,
that
what
won't.
kind of support do you most value?
Honestly,
is it the commercial introductions? Is it the
yes?
Like, what is the piece that you're like, when you say you want to support me, what exactly? Is it the advice? Is it the mentorship? Is it the commercial intros? Is it the fund intros? Like, what is if you had to pick and sort of whatever, which one would spike for you?
For me personally,
is it the perks?
There are not enough perks in the
notion
discount. No, it's commercial intros. Commercial and like partner intros that turn into like long-term value. Because fund intros are very periodic, right? We're raising, we're done raising. But commercial intros are ones that kind of go
build the business
long, build the business, new partners. Like the intro to Paystack is probably one of the most valuable that we've gotten. And so ones along those lines, and it's different for every founder, but I think maybe most people will agree that it's the commercial intros.
I would imagine so.
The perks are, Notion credits and AWS credits. I think it's very interesting because AWS credits are important until they finish, and you have to take over the payment.
No, I asked because it's really interesting, because if you look at it from the investor side, the commercial intros are the hardest things to productize, right? You can productize the perks and whatever.
And that's probably why they're the most valuable.
Right. You can productize to a certain extent you can productize to a certain extent the
fund intros, the perks, all of those things.
Also because the fund intros piece is self-interested, right? So it's in my interest to platform my portfolio companies. It's in the other fund's interest to be open to pipeline and do warm introductions. So the commercial intros are very difficult because there's a layer of even just relationship building, which is a difficult thing, networking, relationship building in a way that's productive enough that I can pick up the call, and I can say, hey,
they're very, very important to most companies, whether you're B2C or even like B2B. SaaS companies need it the most because they are building those and trying to shorten those sales cycles, and they probably find it most valuable. So when people are raising in Nigeria, you find that they're looking for connected investors more than just the money, which is probably why we get that question a lot.